Well, I am outside the courthouse today, and don't worry, I'm not in trouble. Actually, I'm kind of celebrating a bit of an anniversary. 30 years ago this month, my dad he went from being my stepdad to my dad. He adopted me. Before that, when I was a young kid, my biological father had left my mom and I when I was at a very young age. And then we met my stepdad, Bill. I was about 5 years old. And then when I was about 15, he said he followed through with the thing he had been saying for many, many years, which is that he wanted to adopt me. He had decided that he wanted to wait until I was old enough to agree that I wanted to be adopted also. But for years and years, he'd always said, I want to adopt you. I want to give you my last name. This has caused me to reflect a little bit. A 30-year anniversary is kind of a big deal, especially when you remember the adoption. You remember going to court and you remember saying yes to the judge that this is what I want also. And that's exactly what this month is for me. As I've reflected on it though, and I've also been teaching the kids at the Herd, the elementary kids, about the Apostle Paul and how when he began to, when he first met Jesus, let me put it that way, when he first met Jesus, he hated Christians. He was a rotten guy. He was not just a mean guy, but he was someone who found a lot of passion and a lot of joy and a lot of energy from persecuting and hurting Christians whenever he had the chance. And it was in the middle of that ugliness that Jesus first reached out to him. This is a big deal for us to remember. Sometimes we think that Jesus reaches out to us because there's something good about us already. We think he wants to adopt us into our family because we're somehow lovable or we're perfect or there's something unique or special about us. And while that might be true, that isn't the reason why Jesus chooses to adopt you into his family. He comes to you and asks you to join his family because he already loves you. So when he first met the Apostle Paul and he was kind of being this super ugly, mean guy, he wasn't doing anything to show that he was worth being adopted, worth being chosen to be part of God's family. He was actually doing the opposite. And isn't that the case for all of us? That we're not actually doing anything that would say, God, look at me, I'm so wonderful, why don't you have me be part of your family? When God chose us, when he sent his son for us, it wasn't because there was something that we were doing that was proving how wonderful we were. We were already sinners. When Jesus died for us, we weren't being good people. He died for us because we were horrible people, because we were being mean people, just like the Apostle Paul was when he first met Jesus also. And in some ways, just like how I was when I was first adopted. When my stepfather first met me, I was just a little kid that didn't have anything to offer him. But he chose to love me, chose to have me become part of his family, not because I would have something to give back to him, but because he saw me and he knew me he saw the lovableness, that he saw the pieces of me that he loved, that it wasn't because I had done something for him already. I had nothing that I could give him. And it's much the same way in our relationship with God. When we first meet him, we have nothing to offer him. He just loves us because we are his. Now, there's two important reasons why this is good to remember. The first one I've already kind of been mentioning already, and that is when we know that there's nothing we can do to change God's love for us, that is incredibly freeing, isn't it? That there's no way that I can do something so bad that God will stop loving me. And there's also, and the opposite is true, that there's nothing better that I can do to make God love me more. He's not going to take his love away, and his love can't increase because his love just is. The second thing that makes this a big deal is that it lets us know that sometimes in this world we place value and worth on people based off of different things. It's like, oh, you're more valuable because you're a girl, or because you're a boy, or because you're white. Or sometimes we say that people are less valuable because, well, you're a boy, you're a girl, or you're white, or you're black. In the world right now, that's what is really happening in the United States especially, is that we're noticing that black folks have grown up for many, many years hearing that the message, sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's right in their face, that your life isn't as valuable. What the gospel tells us is that Black lives matter, that black lives are valuable. Even though sometimes that's not what is heard. What the gospel is telling us, what the Bible is telling us, is that your lives matter. Yeah. And so these are important things for us to remember, that when we see that on the news, we hear that on the radio, or whatever it is, and when someone says Black Lives Matter, that is not just like a historical, phrase, or a phrase that somebody is saying as a slogan. That is something that God says from the depths of his heart. Now, as we begin to wrap up our time together, I want to remind us that we all have a chance to be adopted into God's family. And 30 years ago today, I was adopted into my dad's family, and I received a new last name, Beckley. Now, when we receive our new last name from God, sometimes that's a name that we want to remember, and that name is loved, it's worthy, it's accepted, it's redeemed, made whole. Those things happen because God invites us to be part of his family and to become his children. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.